everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room, and looks like Devin's lights just went out, but they're back. Never mind. They are back.
Fix it.
Appreciate you joining us. For everybody that's out there, we have Devin Stewart. I'm just going to leave the rank out of it because, I mean,
we don't need
really
to include government names
anyway.
In this. Yeah,
well, I'm getting out anyway, so my rank's going to be relevant for about 2 months.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice. Good for you. Look at you about getting ready to get out of the old gladiator arena and get your little wooden sword. I'm happy for you. Good job, buddy.
Looking forward to it.
Get your freedom.
Got some pokers in the fire, so we're excited about the transition.
Yeah, I bet. Awesome. Well, congrats on that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you joined the Air Force and what you came in to do, and then we'll kind of go there because really you've got two different kind of stories here because you're a Enlisted Accessions recruiter, like currently an Enlisted Accessions recruiter, and you were an AC-130 gunship dude. So you've got so we're going to tag both of those for the listeners out there so that you know exactly what you're going to get out of this episode. So yeah, dive on in, Devin.
Yeah. So anyone that's ever walked in my recruiting office has definitely heard this story. It's part of my sales pitch. So I've got this down pat. So, been in the Air Force 11 and a half years now. Grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I'm a big Florida State guy, right? So my plan was always, I don't come from a very affluent family, or very rich family. So in the state of Florida, we had this scholarship called the Bright Future Scholarship. So if you have a certain GPA, certain ACT score, certain volunteer, whatever, right? They were going to pay 100% of your in-state tuition. So from a very young age, that was my goal. I'm going to Florida State. I'm going to be a physical therapist. I'm going to open my own business back in Tampa, et cetera, et cetera. And then, back in 2008, the economy crashed. So my dad we had a very small construction business. So we weren't making a ton of money, but enough to survive. When the economy crashed, he lost his business, and the only thing he could do was fall back on his law enforcement background. So we had to move to South Carolina, which was the only sheriff's department that was hiring at the time. So we moved to South Carolina. He went from making whatever he was making with his business to a sheriff's department paycheck, which isn't much. So I got a job in South Carolina, which if people don't know, once you get a job somewhere, you are now a resident of that state. So I did that halfway through my sophomore year, the last half of my sophomore year, all my junior year, lived in South Carolina. And then my senior year of high school, I moved back to Florida. I was living by myself. Essentially, I was living with my great aunt, my great uncle that were both 60. So I was essentially living on my own in Florida because me and my family were the only way that you're going to go to college is with that Bright Future Scholarship. Started applying to colleges, kind of found out that I was not a Florida resident, so I didn't qualify for the scholarship that we've been grooming me for since I was 12. Once we found that out, I moved back to South Carolina, moved in with my parents, and we were just what are we going to do? I ended up getting into a small university, University of South Carolina upstate. Actually, we had a player that I went to college with that just won a title with the Nuggets. But went there for a semester, and I was like, man, this college thing is not cheap. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford 4 years at this university, then PT school, my master's, then PT school, whatever. So my dad's like, you ever thought about the Air Force? And of course, I was way smarter than my dad at the age of 18. So I went and talked to the Army.
Of course.
So I went and talked to the Army, and the Army guy was just pushing papers at me and whatnot. He's like, sign this. And I was like, listen, man, I'm just kind of kicking the tires. I just had some questions. Yeah, well, just go ahead and sign this, and we'll look at MEPS next week. And I was like, hold on. So I walked out of the Army office, walked into the Air Force office, and the dude had his feet kicked up on his desk, and he was like, "Sup, dog?" I was like, okay, this is more my vibe. And I was like, hey man, I got some questions. And he was like, yeah, dude. He was like, come on in, sit down. I was the kind of applicant that I strongly dislike. I walked in, told my recruiter, I was like, I'm doing nothing but medical. I ended up crushing my ASVAB. So I was like, I've got a good score. I qualify for all the jobs. I want medical. And my recruiter's like, oh, dude, with a score like that, I'll get you any job you want. I've never had a recruit get lower than his top 3. So I listed every medical job, and then, so I think there was 13 of them. Number 14 was PJ. Number 15 was aerial gunner, right? I put gunner down because it had a cool picture. I put PJ down because it was like kind of medical per the like Air Force website.
Sure.
So I was like, but they both had like cool pictures. So that's why like they were at the bottom. Go down, do MEPS, do the whole deal. Made it through depth perception, color vision, 20/20 vision across the board. Get out of MEPS. My recruiter calls me. He's like, hey man, no medical jobs. And I was like, dog, that's the whole reason I signed up and went to MEPS. I was like, you told me I'd get a medical job. He was like, nope. So wiped all the medical jobs off my list. And then he called me a couple months later and was like, congratulations, you got this one Alpha 7X1 job. And I was like, sick. Like, what medical job is that? He's like, I don't know. Google it. It's like, okay.
Bat 1,000 right now. Your recruiter's really just helping you out. Like, hey, I want to do a medical job. He's like, nah, dog, here's this other job. What is it? Oh, I don't know. Check.
Yeah, he's like, I've never seen this AFSC before, so just Google it.
Real quick before you Google it. So you wanted to come in medical. There weren't any available. So a lot of people are going to go, okay, well, that applied to you, or there are some nuances in there that, like, well, maybe at the time there were, when you got finished, there weren't.
So it makes a lot of sense now as an EA recruiter. I can kind of see what he was talking about, right? So the Air Force is constantly recruiting for every position within the Air Force, but it's the Air Force, it's not the Med Force. So the availability of jobs is different because big Air Force recruiting service will come out and they'll say like, hey, we need X amount of spots in each position. And then that gets fragged out to each group. And then that gets fragged out to each squadron. So then they go in and what they do is it's up to the flight chief to look at everyone's kind of job preference list and then snag up jobs based on the preference list. So looking back on it, I had a bunch of medical jobs and then I had gunner at the bottom. So when he told me like, oh yeah, I can get you that, when he went up to get those jobs and whatnot, like there weren't medical jobs available at the time. But I also had gunner on my list. So he was like, okay, I'm going to snag this job. So it's not to say there weren't any available. I probably could have gotten one, but it was just kind of how it worked out and everything. And honestly, it worked out for the best because looking at Air Force Medical, I don't want to be Air Force Medical. I'm not saying they're bad folks, but
I get where you're coming from.
Well, it's funny how we do that though. You have this conception of what the job is, or there's no real amount. It's hard for people will ask us, oftentimes it's somewhere out of our lane. They're like, hey, they offered me this job. I'm thinking about doing a different job before being a PJ or whatever. They're like, I want to do this job. Like even from being in the Air Force, if you ask me really, what does a 4N do? Like what is the day to day of one of those medical folks or, insert any job that I don't know about, like personnelist or, finance or whatever. I have no clue really what that job entails or what it's like. And then once you get like a little bit of experience with it, you have a completely different view of what that job was beforehand. It's just a weird thing. There's no real amount of information that you can get that would tell you exactly what that's like.
And it's super cool. Like as a recruiter, my favorite part of the job is obviously like the interpersonal part, but also like job counseling. So when a kid comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to do a 1 Delta 7 cyber defense operations, I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So sit down with me and let's do some research. Let's find out what that job is. So I've learned so much about like what kind of on the surface level, of course, but like so much about like what each job kind of entails and kind of what the transferable skills that come out of each job and stuff like that. So it's been the recruiting side of things really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And in that vein, like people that are like, well, I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, dude, have you ever programmed a computer? Have you ever done this? No, but my mom said cyber makes $250,000 a year. It's like, well, your ASVAB says like you got a 99 in your mechanical, dude. You need a wrench in your hand. Like cyber's not your realm, brother. Or people are like, I want to be medical, but then, I love hunting. I love working out. I love doing this. I'm like, so you enjoy being outside, but you want a job. It's going to put you in a hospital with no windows and, lights. So kids have these preconceived notions and whatnot. But like when you can really sit down and kind of break down what each job is and like you said, the reality of what that job actually does, I see a lot of kids kind of open up, and I call them kids. They can range up to 40. So,
right.
But once you kind of have that conversation, you kind of see people kind of open up to it and stuff of that sort, and take some different opportunities, much like I did. So,
no, yeah. Go
okay,
for
so
it.
no,
go for it.
So you Google it and you figure out what job you're going to have, right? So you're going through the entire process and you're getting ready to finally get into the Air Force. When did you actually put 2 and 2 together that you were going to AC-130s?
So back in the day, 1 Alpha 7 X1 was literally titled Aerial Gunner. It's now, we've had a couple different AFSC changes over the last decade or so, but it was Aerial Gunner when I joined. So I was actually in the hospital when my mom was having chest pain. So I was like, hey, Mom, I got my job. She's like, what medical job did you get? And I Googled, I T9 on my little red flip phone. And it pops up Aerial Gunner. And my mom's like, what? And all the machines start going off and blood pressure shot through the
CCR
roof.
comes on.
So yeah, that was when I realized I would be an aerial gunner, which didn't really want to do, but I was like, hey, it leaves when I want to leave, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, cool, I'll roll with it. Went through basic, went through tech school, still really didn't want to be a gunner. I was like, I'll do this for a couple of years. I'll retrain into medical. And then during tech school, doing my 3-level, we graduate, we get our wings, and the instructor comes walking in. He's like, all right, hey, he had a piece of paper in his hand. I was like, is that our job? Is that our base preference? And he was like, oh, you're a short one, Devin. And he was like, how should I divvy these out? And I was like, by height, because I'm 6'5". And he's like, cool, we'll go shortest, tallest. And I was like, God. So he starts going around the room and he's, giving out jobs. And every gunner in the class with me got, gunships. So then I'm the last kid in the class. So he comes to me and he's like, so what do you want to do, Devin? And I was like, well, I wanted to go to DM on 60s, helicopters, but it looks like I'm going gunships. And he was like, congratulations, you got gunships. What base do you want to go to? And I was like, whoa, between the two, I'd rather go to Hurlburt rather than Cannon. He was like, congratulations, you got Hurlburt gunships. And so it was number 6 out of 7 on my list, but I ended up going to Hurlburt, getting trained up on the AC-130U Spooky gunship. And man, as soon as I had my first flight, like we did all of our academics, ground training, all that other stuff, I was still kind of kicking the tires on it, didn't know if I'd like it. First time I saw a 105 go off, I was like, yep, this is it. I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Got me.
So yeah, I ended up getting qualified and then moving over to the 4th Special Operations Squadron over at Hurlburt Field.
Man, well, it ended up for the best, really. And that's your words, not mine. And that's one thing that you had said earlier that that I'd like you to kind of highlight on if you can, because you didn't get the original job you wanted. You said it was kind of I don't think you said a silver lining, but ended up being a really good thing for you. And so, like, how did that work out? Because what I'm trying to relate it to is the folks that are out there that happen to be listening, that things just don't plan out exactly how they want them to, which is why I wanted to ask you about, hey, did that recruiter, lie to you, kind of thing. So, like, how did it end up working out for the best?
And that's what, like, I tell my recruits now, right? Like, that experience with my recruiter 100% influences how I recruit, because I'm going to sit down and I'm going to get to know you, right? So if Jared or Aaron walks into my office and you're telling me I want to do cyber, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and then I get to talking to you and I'm like, dude, you do not have a personality for cyber, right? You do not have a personality for medical, right? Like, you need to be out turning wrenches on a plane. You need to be out, doing X, Y, and Z, because, like, that's me as a recruiter getting to know you. Like, that's the kind of person you are. And I know that you're going to be miserable if you do that. So my recruiter, he didn't have that perspective. He was just looking to make numbers. And gunner at the time was a very hard job to qualify for, because, like, medically, depth perception kills a lot of people, color vision, stuff like that. So the fact that I had those, he was like, cool, I've got this high qual applicant that I can put in this hard to fill job, rather than, like, talking to me about what I wanted to do. So, but it worked out because, like, the gunship community, man, like I said, I've been a recruiter for 2 years now, almost 2 years. And I there's nothing I love more than the gunship community. That's what I miss the most about being a recruiter. So the ability to, be in that kind of community around like-minded individuals, have a mission that we all really kind of buy into. And then the fact that like people like Kyle Pettit, the big homie that you guys had on before, him being a Sizzle or Wizzo, like they're in a chair the whole flight. Pilots, co-pilots, they're in a chair the whole flight. Gunners, we're up, scurrying around, sneaking into dark spots around the plane and whatnot. We're the only ones that have freedom of movement within the aircraft. So it all just like, there were a multitude of factors that like once I got into being a gunner, really just, I was sold, man. I absolutely love it. I can't tout the gunship community enough. So if I had been medical, I would have been miserable. Just sitting behind a desk in a hospital with no windows, maybe taking blood pressure every
Which
other
is fine. If that's your jam, that is. But
well, that's what I'm saying is, for them, like there are people that love that and stay in that career field and do that. It's just, it wasn't my vibe, right? So being out on the flight line, doing the deal, it all just kind of worked out.
No, it's not my vibe either. So, but I met you, we chatted for, 20, 25 minutes, something like that in Jacksonville. So just with that one interaction and then this now, that doesn't fit for you. But the gunship community is pretty incredible in terms of you guys, man, you killed a lot of people, a lot. And
I've actually, so I saw you do this on Pettit's podcast. So I've got got my first bomb that I ever dropped.
No way.
Got my 105, got 25s and 40s, all these are
nice.
Deployment brass. Most of my cool stuff is in the office. I got my little love me wall in my office, but I saw you do that on the other podcast, so I figured I'd break out all that deployment brass and stuff.
Just had to flex on them just a little bit.
No, it wasn't the intention. It was more, kind of connection.
Sure. Connection.
So, man, going back to the gunships, you guys have been a staple pretty much through all of GWAT. You guys were, around before GWAT kind of kicked off, but AFSOC really made its money with a couple of different entities, and that's the reality of it. And the gunship is one of those. And we had kind of started telling little stories in Jacksonville when we met up, but, the amazing thing about an AC-130 is one, it's not just one or two pilots. You have an entire crew up there. So a whole bunch of minds focused on different things. You've got sensors. You've got numerous guns that can range from precision small fire to, okay, we're actually laying some scunion and just destroying and dropping buildings. And not just that, the amount of firepower that is maintained with a massive amount of loiter and playtime. It's an incredible platform. And whoever decided to put, an artillery cannon on the side of a plane is bonkers.
Shout out to that dude.
Yeah. Dude, I hope he's got his own VIP section, because he's,
he has saved more people. 100%. Like, hey, I got an idea. Let's put an artillery weapon on a plane and then have that plane be able to stay overhead for 8 hours while just absolutely raining hellfire on people. And somebody was like, no, Ty, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Everyone just feel like,
we did, guys.
This.
We got something here. Let's go. So as you got through tech school, like it is a hard tech school, right? So for everybody out there that wants to be aerial gunner, wants to track to AC-130s, so the community is amazing. Flying in the Air Force is what people look at the Air Force and think, okay, everybody flies, and that's not necessarily the case, but you found yourself in that community and kind of in that seat. How hard was tech school for you as you were getting through this thing? And I want to kind of like prime you to talk about your recruiter initially. He was just like, no, this it's a hard to fill job. I think this guy could probably do it. And you kind of go from the other side of that coin of, let's match up your personality. But in your case, you didn't know it, but your personality actually met up to this job, even though it was hard for you to get through tech school. What was that experience like for you?
So the reason I kind of smiled and laughed, I almost failed out. I almost didn't make it through training. So one thing that I talk to a lot of my recruits about, because of my own personal experience, I like to relate, make myself more personable to them. You got to know how to study, man. Any job in the Air Force is going to have an academic side to it. And then there's, for us, it was academics, then it's ground training, then it's actual flight training. So when I came in, school was always easy to me, had a great GPA coming out of high school and college, great ACT scores. Like, I'd never really had to study. So I come into tech school thinking, I'm just going to breeze through this, whatever, it's gunner. And man, I got into training, and the biggest things that make a good gunner, right, are situational awareness, the ability to listen to multiple comms at a time, and having that regulation knowledge so that you know the left and right boundaries of where you can operate. And during tech school, I made it through academics just fine. I made it through ground training just fine. But when I started flying, I just didn't have it. I didn't have situational awareness. I wasn't able to listen to comms, read a checklist, operate the weapon, or, do whatever while getting Q&A'd at the same time. So I actually got to a second level performance review board, or PRB, which I had to sit down with the DO of my training squadron. And he asked me, he's like, why should I keep you? Like, why should you be here? And I had to really have a gut check and be like, I'm here 100%. I want to be here, but, I need to change something. So I tell all my kids, I was like, look, dude, when you make it through basic training and you get into tech school, take it seriously, because it is tough. It's not easy, regardless of the career field. Tech school is not there to just push you through. They're looking for people that are going to be good in this. And, it's not nearly as strenuous as a pipeline, but the training
it's no joke.
Is tough, right? You have to be there. And so I looked the student in the face. And then we had a civilian that was kind of in charge of the students when we weren't, working with instructors. And she pulled me out of class, and she ripped into me pretty good and told me, if you fail out, I will see it my job to have you, mopping floors in Wichita Falls. And I was like, I'm not going to Wichita Falls.
Yikes. Hit you with that shepherd threat. Get out of here, my guy.
She was like, I will make it my job. So I, kind of buckled down, and I had to figure out what study techniques worked out for me. And I ended up making it through. It took me a few years after. I was not. So anyone that's going to watch this from the gunship community, I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for this, but so I'll throw this out there.
I'm going to mark this right now. That way we can blast it everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is going to be.
I'm going to throw this out there so those dudes don't flame me too hard. I was a terrible gunner. I was an awful airman. I was a terrible gunner. I just, once I got out of tech school, I still didn't study. Right. So you have a book with it's written in English. So I'm hoping by this point in your life, you can read English, but it's a book. It's written in English. It has all of the regulations in it. And if you just study that book or TO or whatever job, it's going to tell you how to do your job. And that didn't click to me until about halfway through my third deployment. So I was a terrible gunner, terrible airman. And, so I had a pretty rough go at it, but once it all clicked, and I was like, man, if I just read this book, then the sergeants stop yelling at me all the time. That's when my gunship career kind of really took off after that. So kind of circling back to the original question, how was tech school? How was training? It was tough, but if you have that mindset going in, understanding that you need to be a good student, and that'll make the rest of your life much easier, then dudes do much better than I ever did. I'm a big do as I say, not as I did kind of guy. So,
it's like being a parent, man. As soon as you're a parent, you're allowed to be a hypocrite. You're allowed to look at your kid. You're allowed to look at your kids and go, hey, idiot, don't do this. You know why? I did it. It didn't work out well for me. I failed in this aspect of my life. You have to avoid it. Looking back on that one civilian that kind of read you the riot act, how thankful are you now for that input?
Miss Breed, Tanya Breed was her name.
Shout out.
If she's
What's
out
up,
there,
Tanya?
if she hears this, it was that kick in the pants that I really needed, because I sat down with the DO and I was, dejected and whatnot. And the instructors, I didn't see them as friends or coworkers. They were the ones that were getting on me. So I was like, man, this sucks. But when Miss Breed kicked me in the pants, kicked me in the teeth, whatever term you want to use, that was a big turning point for me. And I was like, you know what? Like, she wouldn't have pulled me out of class if she didn't care about me. So having those people around you that care about you and want to see you succeed, definitely, I'm too thankful to say, for Miss Tanya Breed.
Did you have somebody like that in your community on your, you said you've kind of like figured it out where things really click for you. And I think everybody in our circles, we all have that feeling, right? Like you feel like you have no idea what you're doing when you get to your first unit. You're really just straight up faking it until you hopefully figure it out one time. And you on your third deployment kind of put two and two together. Did you have a mentor or somebody that was guiding you through, or maybe gave you that come to Jesus conversation during that third deployment? Or was it really something that you just had to work on internally and figure out how to be better?
No, so definitely had those people around me, but like I said, I was 18, 20, 23, whatever it was at the time. 18 when I joined, and then probably 23 by my third deployment. Like I had a lot of mentors, but I was smarter than all, just like I was with my dad before I went to the recruiting office.
Yep. So
it wasn't until I had a lot of people. One of my favorite quotes is one of my best friends, still Master Sergeant right now, he's about to boot, scoot, and boogie out of the Air Force as well. But he told me on my first deployment, hey, here's your chance to stop being a dumbass. And I didn't take that to heart until later. Him and I ended up being roommates and living together and whatnot. He kind of took me under his wing. Come here, little big bird,
Right.
And there were definitely people around me that were attempting to give me that tutelage and that leadership. And I just wasn't a good enough airman to see that until it all kind of started to click. And then I realized, like, man, I'm surrounded by the best of the best. Like, these dudes, the two guys that were really my mentors, they were both retrainees out of maintenance into gunships. I was a gunship baby. So like, these two dudes are taking me under their wing, both in gunships and just Air Force in general. So it took until that kind of come to Jesus moment that I realized, like, man, these guys are here for me. And then when I started asking those questions, hey, you're the best at 40 malfunctions. Can you help me? Hey, you're the best at being a load master. Like, help me, right? It didn't take until I was terrible to ask those questions to then find out that there were people in my corner and people that wanted to see me succeed. And, gunship crew, like, Pettit kind of talked about it, like bringing in the youngest dude. Hey, man, what do you think about this? The crew is only as strong as the weakest link. So I was always the weakest link until that moment, but I had people that were trying to bring me in and make me strong so that the whole crew was strong. And it was rough. It was rough to start, but we eventually figured it out and we got there.
Well, that tough love, it's people, oh, so and so's an asshole, they're so tough on you, but they do it because they care. Yeah, okay. I'll admit there are definitely people out there that are assholes just to be assholes. Like I got it, but the Tanya Breed or something like that just rips you a new one. That's it's kind of what you needed. And we'll kind of, I'm not going to pause the recording. I'll just talk while you do it. But I feel like I'm talking to somebody, to the silhouette that's wants to hide their identity.
The sun has definitely come through the window, so I'll
there we go.
Try to swap this over here.
It was like we were trying to hide your identity. You were on like To Catch a Predator or something with that mustache. It's like we had it, man.
Did you know that you were talking to a minor online?
Geez, Peaches, take it easy.
Jeez. As I was sitting there talking to you guys, I just saw it getting like darker and darker and darker, and I was like, God, man. I'm like trying to like lean forward. I'm trying to move to like block out some of the sun so it picked me up. So
you're doing great, big baby. Don't you worry about that.
I was definitely thinking the same thing. I was like, man, it's like just an unlocked character over here on the side.
Unlocked, exactly, yeah. I love it.
I don't know if this is any better. I'll try to.
So moving on from kind of the training and tech school, and you talked about deployments, and one thing that I noticed, and I kind of I think most of it, at least on the aspect war notice it, is that you learn a lot during training and tech school and kind of doing your TDY trips and doing full mission profiles and stuff. But the learning curve once you deploy is exponential. I mean, it skyrockets because things are no longer training. Things are real world. You are seeing how things actually operate and move. So, I don't necessarily, not going to ask you what that learning curve was for you because you already talked about it, but tell us about some of those deployments, any kind of highlights, if you will.
Yeah. So this is another story I tell anyone that's ever walked in my office, right? So, my very first combat mission on my very first deployment, I got to shoot. So we were working with a British Special Forces team, Special Boat Service. Can
we give a shout out to the SBS real quick for those of y'all that don't know? Dude, so everybody, we worked with the first time Peaches and I were stationed together in England. Everybody on the podcast knows this, but the first time we worked with the Special Boat Service, we went and jumped with them, and I wasn't really tracking how amazing the SBS was. I always everybody knows the SAS, right? And one of their one of their younger dudes kind of pulls me aside. So two funny things about this. Number one, the major that we were jumping with, they had a major that was in charge of the team that we were jumping with, and he just 100% big time the 130 dudes. They wanted him to show up 3 hours early to do all these jam briefs and whatever. And the guy literally, I won't do the accent because I think that can possibly get me canceled in today's thing, because I'm assuming somebody else's culture. But he was like, hey, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get to your little plane. You're going to twist your little dials. You're going to pull your little levers. And then I'm going to get on and I'm going to jump when I want to get on and jump because you're the plane and I'm the jumper. And that's how this worked. And we, he did it in front of a bunch of people, all the jump masters. We were like, yo.
We're not going to do your stupid little low level stuff. You guys can save that for after you throw us out.
Yeah.
You're going to go straight there and we're going to jump.
Dude, hilarious. So he's like, I'm not going to your brief. You're going to drop me first. I'm not playing around with this. So that was number one. And then number two, one of the younger guys, I was like, hey, I've never really heard of you guys. He's like, yeah, that's because when our special forces screw something up, it was the SAS. If you've never heard of it, it's the SBS. I was like, ooh, yo. I was like, golly, you guys are freaking tough right now. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
You're just like, this is that dude.
I was like, he got that. He had an X-ray. Turns out he had that dog in him. I had no idea. I was like, yo, what is going on with these guys? These guys are playing the not fucking around game, and they are winning it every turn. But anyway, okay, so SBS, you're supporting them on your deployment. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my first shoot, man, it was my very first combat mission. So, about as green as you can be, dude. 0.0 hours in Afghanistan, and we take off and we're over the SOP. So my lead gun at the time, he was on his third deployment, and my two other gunners were on their 9th and 10th. So they were good. They were doing the thing. I was in the window. My lead gun was like, hey, just listen to comms, kind of get a feel for how a mission goes. And I was like, all right, sick. So I was sitting in the window, and our sensors, the SBS lands, they're infilling. They were just doing a VSO, kind of going through the village, making sure everything was good. And as soon as they landed, we, got a friendly picture, what they're doing, where they're at, and then they start infilling, and we see kind of two dudes off to the side. And we're like, maybe that's one of their blocking positions, maybe that's one of their, whatever. So we're watching these dudes, they're literally just laying out in the grass, chilling. As the SBS goes through the village, they kind of move. And then when the SBS is coming out, they run into a wadi. They run into a tree line. And we're like, normally blocking positions don't do that. So I'm sitting here listening to comms, and I'm like, I don't know what a VSO is. I don't know what a blocking position is. I don't know what any of this is. But the sensor is telling the pilot's like, hey, call that in. And by the way, depressurize the aircraft. So you can't shoot when the plane's pressurized. I think now with some 105 updates, they can, but back in the day, we couldn't. So he's like, hey, depressurize the aircraft. So I'm like, oh, man,
about to do it.
Are we going to shoot? I was like, wow. I'm sitting there, my blood pressure's coming up. I'm like, oh, man, this is it. So I end up, my lead gun's like, hey, get out of the window, come to the back, bring your O2. So I disconnect. One of the other gunners jumps in the window. I go to the back. I'm on the 105. We depressurized the aircraft. We were at 15,000 feet. So I'm on my O2 mask. And back in the day, we were hot mic. So you're just you got your mask. And I'm like, I'm like, I'm huffing. I'm like, holy crap, this is about to actually happen. And my lead gun looks at me across the gun and goes, hey man, you're like an 8. I need you at like a 4. And I like, so we call down to the JTAC and we're like, hey man, we got these 2 dudes in the wadi. Don't know if they're your blocking position or whatever. And he's like, stand by, mate. I'll go check it out. So
I love it.
The JTAC and another dude. Yeah, JTAC and this other, oi, bruv. The JTAC and this other cat just literally go walking up to them. There was no like call out, nothing. They just like walk straight up to this tree line. And out of the tree line, 2 dudes pick up AKs and they just start going to work. And the JTAC and the other dude pick up their weapons. They got one dude organic, and then the other dude starts running away from them. And he's like, yep, nope, not our dudes. You're clear to engage. And we're like, dude, you're like 50 meters from this dude. And he was like, that's fine. Clear to shoot.
Hit him with the 40, dog. Hit him with the 40, dog.
We were like, dude, like, even the 40, that's danger close.
Yeah.
We were like, yo. And he was like, no, we'll jump down to this wadi. We'll be covered. You're clear to engage. So my lead gun's like, hey, get the gun going. So we started shooting 105s at this dude. He ended up getting fragged out, running into a gully, and we jacked this dude up. We did the deal. And then it's funny because like in that moment I was, so hyped up. My lead gun's like, hey dude, bring it down. You're going to be good. You're going to be all right. Ended up doing the deal, go back, shave my head, super excited, yada, yada.
Why? And then is that a gunship thing? You have to shave your head?
After your first kill, yeah, you shave your head.
I didn't know that.
So
I learned all kinds of stuff today. I wasn't tracking the AC-130. I didn't know the depressurization thing before today. I didn't know the shave your head thing. We're all learning. This feels good.
So it's a super, super cool tradition. Some commanders have tried to like take it away. So back in the day, it was not voluntary. It was like, this is happening.
Nice.
And everyone on the crew kind of gets a little wonk off your head. But then your lead gun is the one that like finishes it up. So they jack your hair up. You look like an idiot. Everyone takes photos, and then they shave you clean.
Heck yeah.
So
born again, my guy.
But then after that, like your gun deck, your gun crew, they give you like a patch, right? It's a little gunner pin tab, like on your flight suit. They give you that, and they give you your gunner wings because now you're officially a gunner. Because that was the mindset back in the day. Is like you're not one of us till you kill somebody. So I got my first kill on my first combat mission. I was one of the boys. And then it was funny because when my 5th deployment, when I was a lead gun and I had this kid on his first trip, it was like, deja vu. I'm sitting there on the backside of the 105. I start hearing the comms and I'm like, hey, Aguirre, come here, let's go. And he was like, what? And I was like, get on the gun, get ready. And he was like, what's going on? I'm like, listen to the comms. Like, we're spinning up. Something's about to happen. And he was like, and then I was like watching this kid and he was on the other side of the gun. He was like, getting all excited. And I remember looking at him like, hey dog, you're at like an 8. I need you at like a 4.
How crazy is it? That's obviously the most like full circle thing ever. Like, how did you feel in that moment when you were on the other side of the gun and you were the senior guy?
I didn't realize it until, later because like in the moment, we're all just worried about the mission, right? I'm listening to comms. I'm like watching my dude like, hey man, I need you here, right? I need you right here, right now. Right. It wasn't until later I sat down. I was like, man, like that conversation sounds really familiar. But looking back on it, I still talk to all those dudes from that deployment stuff. I keep up with them and they tell me some stories I forget. But like in that moment, I remember that specifically being like, man, everything that I've gone through up to this point, like it's come full circle. And my favorite part of the Air Force is like being an NCO, being able to lead and guide those cats and, being the dude they feel comfortable coming to. So like in that moment, I really felt like that was, one of those NCO maturation moments where, I got to be the guy that he'll tell that story. I was super, super nervous and Sergeant Stewart looked at me and said, so it was a super cool moment. One of my favorite moments in the gunship that, obviously I didn't think of at the moment, but now looking back on it, that was awesome.
You covered a lot there. So let me back up real quick. One comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
NCOs are the backbone of the Air Force. That. Oh yeah. And you said it right there without saying it. 2 is what rank were you during your first shoot?
I was in A1C.
So
that's an E3
for everybody,
folks.
Yeah,
that's a 20-year-old young man without a fully formed brain.
The the level
and just hucking
and this is what I
105s.
wanted
Just
to
let it
kind of
go.
highlight, and it's you bring it up, and we talked about this yesterday, and I forget what we recorded an episode yesterday. I think it was why choose aspect war, right? And we're talking about how the Air Force, you have the Army and the Navy, they promote faster, especially the Army, they promote faster. You know, ODAs are hysterically E7 in 7 years, 7 and 7. Whereas it is not unusual for AFSOC or the Air Force to put an E2, E3, E4 in charge of some serious shit. There you are, your very first deployment on an AC-130, about to take some people's lives supporting high level operations as an E3. Like that's, I gotta highlight that because people don't realize what we levy onto our young airmen and expect them to do and perform. And, you know, you're operating an 8, your crew, and I'll tell you what, the guys on the ground needed you to be at a 4, right? Just like you needed that airman that you were training, that you were mentoring to be at a 4, because we need you to be able to competently react and perform under pressure, because we never know when you're going to get put into that kind of situation. So I felt that it was important to highlight and shout out to Aaron, because Aaron hit me on the side and was like, dude, you got to go into that. So right on.
You don't tell people that, Peaches. You look good. That's my job. That's what you're supposed to do.
I'm here to make you guys
giving away all the podcast secrets.
I know, yeah, right. It's something that we hit on yesterday, and it's something that we have, you know, the more that we talk kind of amongst the three of us when we're doing show prep, when we're talking to people, it's this thing that we've tried to really start messaging to people, is that we in the Air Force, unlike all the other services, we're going to put you in that position. You had 0 hours in Afghanistan. You were barely out of tech school. You didn't even feel like you were a good gunner. And still there was somebody that was willing to like look at you and be like, listen, I need you to do this. I'm going to put you in this situation. And I think people gloss over that. You know, when they're in their development programs, no matter what job it is that they're getting in the Air Force, they're like, I'm going to do this down the road. I'm going to do this when I get trained. I'm going to do this when I get there. No, you're going to do it way before you think you're ready. You're going to do it way before you think you're competent. And you're going to do it under the watchful eye of a subject matter expert that really hasn't been doing it for that long. That guy that walked you through your very first, shoot event, he probably was doing it for less than 10 years. He was not some Jedi master that was like, 100 deployments. He had a handful of deployments. I remember on my first deployment, I was lucky enough to have, a PJ with me that had deployed before, but he had 1-2 month deployment 5 months before that. Like he hit a short rotation, came off that rotation, and then he deployed with me. And that was the guy that I was like clipped into the entire time. I was like, I'm learning everything about being a PJ from you. But we put these kids, and I'll say kids because they are, but we put these 18, 19, 20-year-old airmen into sometimes impossible situations. And we're like, it's okay if you don't do great, but it's a pass fail, and you passed. And that's just a testament to what it is that we do in the Air Force. And I'm sure that shapes how you look at recruits. Like that experience when and we'll get into the recruiting piece here in a second, but I'm sure that changes how you look at applicants and how you put them in jobs that you think that, that you see the potential for success.
So kind of on that note, circling all the way back to like mentors and people around me that like helped me get through it and whatnot, spinning up for that first deployment, because I had been just, as the kids would say, dog water through the pipeline. One of my instructors, I was out because I was 20. Yeah, I actually failed a flight on my 21st birthday. So I was 21 before I deployed. So I was out drinking, and one of the schoolhouse instructors was out at the bar. And him and I, like, now I'm not a student anymore, so I can hang out with him, whatnot. We were drinking together, and we ended up going back to his place and just kind of hanging out, talking. And I was asking him, like, hey, man, I'm getting ready to go on this deployment. And I started freaking out. I was like, dude, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, I don't know if I'm, like, ready to go do this. And he looked me dead in the face and he was like, I wouldn't have let you out of the schoolhouse if I didn't think you were ready to deploy with my guys, right? All those dudes in the op unit, those are my dudes, right? Just because I'm at the schoolhouse doesn't mean I'm detached from that. He was like, so if you weren't ready, you would not be in the unit flying with my dudes. So, like that gave me a lot of solace as well. That kind of grounded me because I was like, man, I was freaking out. I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ready to do this. Like these guys are all, 3, 4, 5 deployments deep. Like I said, the two of the gunners on my crew had 9 and 10 deployments respectively. So I was like, man, I'm first dude, first trip dude. But yeah, that really grounded me. And I had those people around me so that when we talk about putting these 18, 19-year-old kids in those positions, like you're not going to be in that position if we didn't think that you're ready, whether that's medical, cyber, gunships, CCTs, PJs, right? Like you're not going to get there if we don't think you're ready.
No. And that translate across all of them. It doesn't matter the career field. Well, maybe it kind of does, just in the way that not everybody, I'd say it translates across all the combat related, because it is people's lives that your own community, other communities, you have to make sure that somebody is ready to go. So, before we move on to recruiting, is there any last things you want to hit on gunships? I gotta say, and I've said it many times on here, but I've got a lot of ground time with some AC-130s. Thanks to 9/11 and GWAT, stuff like that. So shout out to all the gunships communities out there, and you guys have saved my life. Not just the AFSOC gunship community, but also the combat Air Force in terms of A-10s, F-16s, and so on and so on. So thanks for what you guys do and will continue to do out there.
No, I did 9 deployments, so I've got stories
I'm sure
we can talk all day about combat deployments and stuff that goes on in the aircraft. But like, I don't know, man. Just gunships in general, it's the best place to be. I think it's the best plane in the sky. I don't think anyone rivals us when it comes to CAS. Other planes try, but we do, and just I've got so much love for that community and so much love for my dudes that are still out there doing the deal. And a quick story about like kind of what guides me as far as my love for gunships, and then I think applies to you guys as well. That first deployment, I was very fangs out, got my first kill, my first flight. I was out there. I was ready. I was like, dude, let's shoot everything that moves. And we took off on a mission one time, and we get out overhead, and the JTAC comes up. Jag dude comes up on comms, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna be off comms. Zombies got comms. I'm gonna bed down for a minute. And I was like, what? The JTAC's going to sleep? I was like, why are we here? I was like, this is stupid. Like, I could be back in my dorm room, doing whatever, looking at Instagram. And that 10-trip gunner, man, I'll never forget, he snagged me up by my collar, and he was like, you're going to shut up and you're going to do the job. Because if that dude who's been in a firefight for 72 hours needs to get some sleep, maybe he gets to heat up an MRE and eat some hot food, you're going to fly for 12 hours so that guy can do that. And I just remember being like, man, get off me. Like, this is stupid. I want to be back in my dorm. And it wasn't until later that I started meeting some of the operators, some of the JTACs and stuff like that, that I really realized, like, what we do as gunships is that so that you guys can go home. Mm-hmm. The 16th SOS, when I transitioned to AC-130 Whiskeys, our commander, we got away from that. Like, our job is to kill people, and our motto was always to protect. So I started preaching that to my dudes. Like, look, dude, man, like, your job, is to work these guns. But any day that we don't shoot, that's a good day, right? Because that means our dudes on the ground are not getting shot at, right? Their lives are not in danger. So that mission, like, I've met a lot of JTACs, follow them on Instagram, stuff like that I've shot for and whatnot. And I get to see pictures of their kids growing up. I get to see pictures of them going off, being instructors, doing whatever, having these successful careers. So it's like, all the glory of, whatever we did in battle and stuff of that sort is cool. But like, that's the real prize, right? Getting to see you guys still kicking it, still having a good day, and, having a little piece in that. And that's what gunships are about, man. And that's what I really, really loved about the community.
Yeah, that is a legit thing in terms of the sleeping. I know I've had AC-130s overhead while I sleep, while I catch some Z's. I've had some remotely piloted aircraft, some MQ-9s, just kind of, and I've had some B-1s, which are very loud aircraft to have just kind of hanging out, and a very expensive aircraft to have hanging out. But, you know,
right.
when you're going on 36 hours of fighting and haven't slept, it's like, and I recognized in myself as I'm generating 9 lines and that kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, I'm not writing these well enough, and now I'm starting to second guess. And last thing I want to do is drop. I remember dropping 4 GBU-31s, which are 2,000-pound bombs, because we were surrounded, and so I had basically 4, north, south, east, west, and 3 went off, 1 didn't, but as they're falling, I could hear them whistling, and it was just like, oh boy, here we go, and everybody starts ducking behind the vehicle, and I'm like, dude, it's 2,000 pounds. There's 4 of them. There's no point in doing that. If I messed up, we're done. So,
right.
Like you really are, and it's a numbers, right? That's all it is numbers. Yeah, there's checks and balances within a 9 line. It's inherent to a 9 line. There's checks and balances, there's correlation and all that kind of stuff. But this is also, earlier before some of these planes had targeting pods. So, you're still doing, like for B1s, we were doing stuff off of radar. So, there's some challenges. And when you start talking about, the fog of war or lack of sleep, and it can get really, really ugly and really, really dangerous pretty fast. And that whole sleep thing is a real thing.
And yeah, like I said, being just a young dude, not really understanding any of that, because like I didn't know any controllers or anything. But because at that time, to me, a controller is just a voice and a headset. But when you start meeting these dudes, and I look back on that, and I think about, like this is my buddy, right? This is my dude. Like, I have a lot of controller buddies, some still in, some that are out, but it's like this dude, yeah, he's been in a firefight for 3 days, right? If this dude needs to kick his boots off and get a 20-minute power nap,
that's all it takes.
Like, I'll fly 14 hours now. Like I'll extend my crew duty day, like to give you guys that opportunity. And the fact that the gunship just being overhead is enough for, the shitheads to go away. Like that's your job, dude. Go out there and do it. And I don't want to hear any complaining, because kind of the same story with my first shoot. I had that same experience down the road where a kid was like, "Whoa, why are we doing this mission?" And I was like, "You're going to shut up and you're going to do it, dude." I was like, because
I hope there was a knife hand in there.
There was, yeah, a very firm knife hand.
There was a big lead gun standing over this kid as he was reading the cough, and I was like, "You're going to shut up and you're going to fly."
Listen here, Turbo.
Oh, yeah. Were you some kind of weatherman?
So how do you know what kind of day it is? So as our careers do, man, we mature and we go on, and obviously, you and Jared met through, through a recruiting kind of get together, and it's no secret that we've been talking about you moving through the recruiting. How do you use those experiences from your gunship days and from your time in the Air Force to really communicate those positive things to the recruits now?
So I just I tell kids, the Air Force has been phenomenal to me. I've got no debt, like all the money that I've made, stuff like that, the places that I've been, I like to leverage. Like I have friends that went to Clemson University, Florida State University, all these big schools, and they're right back in their hometown, right? Like when I lived in South Carolina, my friends went to Clemson University, and every year for a vacation, they go to Myrtle Beach. It's like,
listen, Myrtle Beach is lovely. Don't you knock on Myrtle Beach, baby.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like, sure, like these dudes got the degree and they did what society told them was what you need to do as a young adult. But like the Air Force has given me the opportunity to travel around the world, go to places that people have never seen, do things that none of my friends can even conceptualize, right? It's broadened my horizons in that aspect. It puts you around people that you probably never would have hung out with, right? So I'm sure you guys have seen it, and there's a meme out there. It's like when you guys get out of uniform, you go to the bar on TDY, and it's 4 different. It's like a cowboy, like a gangster.
Yeah.
It's like these dudes that you would have never hung out with, and now that's my brother. That's my dude, right? So all that kind of stuff, the money, the travel, the like experiences and like the friendships that you make. I talk about all of my gunship experience and how tight like a crew gets. Like I would have never talked to, Aaron in high school, right?
Right.
Like, but now that's, that's my dude, man. Like, so I try to leverage that. I talk about my experiences that way and talk about, getting out of your hometown and seeing the world and stuff like that. I use all that stuff in my recruiting sales pitch.
Yeah, it's a great big world out
From the
there.
recruits, it really is. Yeah. From the recruit side of it, what are the biggest barriers? What are the most frequent things that you're like, man, I think you're great for this job. I think you should pull the trigger and get in. What's the number one response that you hear and you're just like, come on.
So
I knew every recruiter, this is all you got to do. Usually I just throw this grenade. I went to a recruiting event. I throw this grenade at a table at a bar one night and I just sat back. I was like, let's go.
It's like my parents were, guilty of this as well. Like every parent tells their kid, you need to go to college, you need to get a job, that's going to do this. So every kid wants to do cyber, every kid wants to do medical, every kid wants to do, whatever. And it's like, dude, this isn't the cyber force. This isn't the med force. Like this is the Air Force. Our job is to produce sorties and go out there and do the deal. Right. And then you've got AFSOC war that's, has nothing to do with generating sorties, but
not a bunch of nonners.
Bunch of nonners, dude.
The second time I think that's like the third appearance of the word nonner on this podcast. I love it.
I'm still over here going like,
no clue. I don't know who a nonner is. Am I a nonner? Is he a nonner?
So when I was in ALS, one of my best friends is a combat controller. I called him a nonner. And we had this back and forth, man. He was like, I'm not a nonner. And dude, he just got so fired up. I was giving him a hard time. I'm like, you are a nonner, dude. You don't produce anything.
Somebody called me a nonner, and I was like, okay, I don't even know what that means. And it made them so mad. Like, because like technically PJs were air crew for the longest. I think we still are air crew, but like they're like, oh yeah, you're an air crew, but you're a nonner. And I was like, okay. And I just went on with my life. And they were like, I called you a nonner. I was like, I don't care. I don't know what that is. You could have called me a flip flap, and I'd been like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't know.
My favorite thing about nonner is like everyone in the Air Force has their duty, right? The Air Force is about generating sorties. But the best thing about calling someone a nonner is that when you call them a nonner, they just go off the rails. Somebody they get all upset, and you're like, so then it's like, okay, now I'm going to twist this knife now that I know that this bothers you.
Right.
But
I think that's why the guy got so mad at me, because he expected some big reaction. I was just like, I don't care. Like, it was a helicopter, dude. I just went back to like getting gear ready in the back because we were about to fly on a sortie.
Right, I'm gonna go rescue this guy. Okay, so we good?
Yeah, we gotta go get into a gunfight real quick. But I mean, yeah. Well, do me a favor. When I call you, just come back in. All right.
Yeah.
How about that?
It's very rare that like you see, and nobody messes with the AFSOC war dudes, right? Everyone's,
Well, because we resort to violence as our like problem solving technique. That's why. Like, you might have this like funny back and forth. Like, half of my friends will just punch you in the face for it. They're like, I don't understand what you meant, but I'm going to start off by punching you.
I did no harm.
So, but I leverage that to like kids want to do cyber, they want to do medical, and I'm getting down to the nitty gritty about why do you want to do that? Well, it's the most civilian transferable skill. Intel's another big one. They're like, I want to go into Intel because I want to go to the FBI afterward. And I leverage my gunship experience where I'm going to be doing skill bridge here soon with a company called the Global Special Operations Forces Foundation, right? And the only reason that I even got in with them is because like I had SOF experience and I was a gunship guy. So when you look at it, you read the airforce.com, description of an aerial gunner, you're like, that has no civilian transferable skills. Well, it does. Every career field in the Air Force has a civilian transferable skill. So you might think that you want to do cyber because you can get out and go do whatever, right? But like people don't think about ammo, like, 2 Whiskey 031, right? Munitions. I have a good friend. He's a recruiter with me as well. As an E4 senior airman, he was building the internal navigation system on a GBU-39 small diameter bomb. He was an E4 in the Air Force on a team with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman scientists that were developing this. So when I tell that, I was like, this dude was an E4, and all of a sudden these scientists are like, dude, you want to come join our team? Like, when do you get out of the Air Force? And you would never know that if you just read airforce.com munitions description. So that's kind of one of the biggest things that I see is kids want to get into something and they don't understand that everything in the Air Force has a civilian transferable skill. And so I have to spend a bunch of time kind of breaking down that barrier. And most kids normally kind of open up to it and they go tell their parents. Their parents are like, oh, I never thought about that. It's like, well, yeah, that's why it's my job as a recruiter to teach you that.
What are some other common mistakes that recruits make especially when they engage in kind of that very first, those first couple of contacts? You know, I know that it's not make or break with everything, but I imagine that there are some times that are some very important kind of conversations that happen, especially in the early part. What are some mistakes that those recruits make?
Mistakes. A lot of people have this perception that we're just there, right? I'm just there to talk to you, right? And while, yes, that is part of the job, like I'm one man and I cover 5,500 square miles. I have 27 schools I'm responsible for. So, like, I'm constantly out in the zone. I'm constantly out at schools. I could be at a school an hour and a half away, right? And people think they can just like walk up and open my door and ask me, how long is basic training? So the biggest mistake that I think a lot of recruits make is they don't do their research. They don't come prepared, right? So we as the Air Force, we're not like the Army, where the Army office right next to me has 6 recruiters, right? So there is constantly someone in their office to walk in and you can just walk in and say, hey, tell me about the Army. And they have that time to do that. I'm in an office by myself. I have a spec ward recruiter in my office, but he's not like, his job is not to do general enlisted accessions like I do. So he's out doing his thing. I'm out doing my thing. People are trying to like open our door. And then all of a sudden we get this bad rap. The Air Force recruiter's never there. He doesn't answer my phone call. And I'm like, dude, I'm out doing stuff. I'm not just sitting at my desk waiting for you to come talk to me. So that's one thing. If like any potential recruits are listening to this, please do your research. Come prepared with questions, at least have some idea of what you want to talk about. Don't just come into my office and I'm like, all right, cool, man. Like, what questions do you have for me? And they're like, none. I'm like, dude, this is the first time you've ever talked to an Air Force personnel and you have no questions.
Right.
Like, give me a bone here.
Because they've been watching the podcast.
What's the day-to-day like? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Careful what you wish for. We're going to send them there with a bunch of high-level questions that you're not prepared to answer. It's going to be great. You're going to sit there and just be like, damn, one's ready.
I like to say I get paid to talk, so help me earn my paycheck.
There you go.
Right.
I like it. So typically we end on advice, man. Whether it's anybody that's trying to get in, typically we're talking to people that are AFSPEC war candidates that want to get in and try to do one of the AFSPEC war career fields. But every job in the Air Force is tough. Everything that we've talked about from, being an adult learner, whether you want to do medical, cyber, a flying job, one of the special operations career field jobs, they're all tough. Nothing is easy. You're evaluated every day. And then on the back end of that, you're going to be put in positions that we're going to force you to go into positions where you're uncomfortable and you have to perform. So usually we ask our guests, if you could go back, if you could give one piece of advice to the folks listening right now that are, on the beginning of their journey and they're trying to get into this Air Force and into this life, what would you tell them?
Take it seriously. I always brief my dudes that are getting ready to go to basic training, whatever career field they're in. It's like, take it seriously. Like, you're going to be told where to be, what to do, this and that, through your training and whatnot. But like, a lot of it's on you, right? So take it seriously, be prepared. Whether it's cyber, AFSPEC war, gunner, whatever, like, you can always go party once you're at your unit, right? You can always go chase women or dudes or whatever when you're at your unit. But like, if you fail out in training, you're in the Air Force, brother. Like, you're going to do what the Air Force says. So like, take it seriously, study hard, get your unit, and then enjoy the Air Force after that. But like, buckle down, take training seriously. And then once you're in, just don't be an Airman Stewart, right? Like, be better than I was. Listen to those around you. Ask your NCOs for advice. Just be coachable, humble, trainable.
Dude, man, that sounds like a familiar mantra. Just throwing it out there. Not that I've ever heard that before, but
right.
Devin, man, solid. I was telling Aaron I was like, dude, I could talk to Devin for a couple more hours.
Yeah.
Now you're entertaining and good to talk to.
It's funny how quickly time goes, you know?
Dude, people don't realize it. And they, and not that you were nervous about that. You like talking and you're comfortable, but there are some people that we've talked to that are kind of nervous about coming on, and they're like, I don't know. And then next thing you know, we're closing. They're like, dude, we've been going for an hour. It's like, yeah, it happens quick.
Yeah. And we actually had to cut it short. It's funny too. Like we've never in the history of the podcast, how long we've been doing this for like more than 4 years now, like 4.5 years, 275, almost 300 episodes. Not a single time have we ever gone short. Not a single time have we ever just been like, well, nothing left to talk about at 30 minutes and whatever. Almost every single time we're like, bro, I got stuff to do with my life. Like, we're going to have to cut this up. We're going to have you back on to continue talking about this stuff. So, man, we appreciate your experience and your stories and everything that you've shared with us today. Like, that's important for everybody out there that's still listening here after an hour and a couple minutes of talking to Devin. You can do what he did. You can be the not perfect airman starting out. You can find your way to a good career in whatever job it is that you want to do. You just have to set your mind to it. And like Devin said, you have to try, you have to care, and you have to get there and realize that it's going to take a little bit first. So, man, Devin, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man.
I'm super excited. First podcast, so I think I did okay.
Let's go, beer.
But I definitely appreciate you guys having me on. I was super excited and had a lot of fun. So yeah, thank you guys.
Absolutely. Well, I don't really want to say anything after Aaron did, so I'm just going to bounce here. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave us a review. Check out all of our partners, Attack Elite, Hoist, Eberly Stock, Cardo Max, all those good folks. And then go to onesready.com and get a shirt or something. All right, out here. Light 'em.
Holla. Light.